Hello, my name is Stephen Hanley. I will be giving you a presentation of applying lean principles to product development. So here's an outline of the presentation that we'll be giving. First, we'll talk about why product development needs lean. We'll go through the costs that companies are spending on R&D, the relevance and scope of this project as it relates to our class and operations and lean process improvement. I'll also compare product versus manufacturing. It's something that comes up quite a lot here at the company I work at, but I think in general people confuse the two, product development versus product manufacturing. And I'll also give you an overview of what the typical product development process is, and then we'll get into how we can improve that and applying some lean principles to it. We'll go through some industry examples and then really dive into the Toyota product development system, which is kind of the basis of much of this presentation, and then some recommendations around how to generate ideas and the process that we could have with lean product development. So here's what some of the largest companies in the world are spending on R&D relative to revenue. Now, what can become pretty apparent right when you look at this is most of these companies are predominantly software companies, but even Amazon, I mean, they're largely a distribution company. Of course, they have a lot of software and various other product offerings, but they spend 10% of their revenue on R&D, which equates to $9 billion. And Intel, Microsoft, Google, these companies are all spending up over 10% of their revenue on R&D. Apple has come down in their spending recently over the years relative to their revenue. That's because revenue's gone up so much, but the point I just want to make with this is companies spend a lot of money on R&D, so it's when you look at why lean would be justified, well, you're spending a lot of money, spending a lot of time, and you want to make sure you get good output of that investment and a significant investment at that. Here are a couple extreme examples of R&D versus production. One is Cadence Design Systems. This is a software system for 3D modeling that a lot of mechanical engineering firms and other firms will use. What's so extreme about this is, yes, it's a software, but software has some direct costs, but those costs only equate to about 8% the cost of goods of revenue, whereas they spend 42% of revenue on R&D, meaning they spend more to develop than they do to actually make the product that they're selling. Another example here I have is National Instruments. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because I'm the product manager of a product line that is test and measurement platform that we're trying to kind of compete in National Instruments to some respect and in that space. And these are National Instruments has products, hardware products and software to record data and then analyze it for testing an environment and manipulating an environment with controls. They spend 25% of revenue on the product that they make, so 25% of their revenue goes into production, but then they spend 18% on new product development. So, this is relevant to me personally, but it's a company that has a hardware product that also has software, but their R&D spend is almost as much as how much they spend on making the product itself. So again, these two examples, these extreme examples as well as those big companies of the world, just to make the case that R&D is a real concern of companies and they spend a fair bit of money on R&D. So relevance and scope for this class, again, a lot of tech companies spend a decent amount on R&D. That's because there's an evolution from more manufacturing, old school type products to software and more significant technology investments. And so, again, spend a lot of money on R&D. Product development is a process. There's defined inputs and outputs, and we'll get into that on the next slide. And because of that, it can benefit from continuous improvement. Typical product development process lacks a lot of basic principles in lean, and that's because folks look at product development as more of this creative, free-flowing process, but it can benefit from some lean principles, some pretty basic ones, pull versus push. A lot of product development kind of gets pushed through an organization. There's siloing, so information doesn't flow all that well. So again, Product development is a significant process, significant investment, but it is different than manufacturing, but it has some similarities in terms of processes and how we can apply lean to improve it. So here's some differences between product development and manufacturing. So the objective of manufacturing is to convert an input, which is the raw material, to a finished good, which is also a physically finished product, and that's value. Whereas in product development, it's really more intangible. You're converting an idea to a new product design, and so it's, input is information, and the output is now a design. So it's not really all that tangible and physical. The people are also different. In manufacturing, you have technicians with basic education levels. You certainly have engineers that are working with them, and managers that may have more education, but most of the direct cost is with technicians that are disciplined and prefer stability. Whereas in product development, your costs come from engineers, designers with college, postgraduate degrees. They prefer autonomy, kind of free form to how they go about their work. They prefer a constant state of change and always learning new things. So the people are quite a bit different. The way you measure waste is also quite a bit different. Waste is easily visible in production because it's a physical waste. You can see it, and you can really easily track time being spent on activities that are unnecessary. In product development, the waste is really when you have an idea that you spend a lot of time developing and it ends up not working, or the customer doesn't buy it, or what have you. So basically the waste is bad ideas and wasted time to communicate between teams. Manufacturing process is very linear, whereas the product development process tends to be more circular and non-linear. So these are some core differences between manufacturing and product development. Here's a typical product development process. It starts with requirements, and that's generated by the management team. And then the engineering team will come up with some ideas to meet those requirements, and proposes those to management, who then selects the idea that they prefer. Engineering then makes a prototype and tests it. And then once they've got a good prototype they like, they hand that to manufacturing, who produces it, who then hands it to marketing and sales to promote it and get it out to the world with customers. A couple points I want to make here is, one, the sizes of my bars across the top there are to show relative value, relative time spent in these activities. A significant amount of time is typically spent on the idea generation, the prototype development, and launching it to the market, and there's less time spent on the requirements, screening, and testing. Another thing to highlight is it's very siloed. Management comes up with the requirements, hands it to engineering, engineering comes up with the ideas, hands it back to management. Engineers then make a prototype and test it and hand it to production, who else then gets put on their plate of this design they need to make. And then all of a sudden, once they start making it, it gets handed to the marketing and sales team to say, hey, here's a product, go sell it. And so it's very siloed and pushed through and not pulled. So I just went through some of those problems in the previous slide, but yeah, the big problem is push through, not pulled. So customers generate value, yet they're really only getting the solution at the very end of a process. They're not engaged throughout it, and they're not necessarily be the ones that pull it through. There's also no consensus established within the teams, and all the teams are siloed. A cross-functional setup could improve the quality, productivity, and enhance the information flow. Another issue is it's very linear. There's no room for continuous improvement and adapting to changing technologies, changing customer needs, what have you. It's also unlevel. As I showed, there's more time spent in certain process steps than others, and this can result in you maybe getting too far down the line with making a prototype that wasn't really properly screened, and maybe a better screening could have prevented wasted time there, or improved testing could have reduced the amount of time spent in production. You need to try to look to level these process steps. So in a book by Ronald Muscadelli called Lean Product Development Guidebook, he kind of defines these three dimensions of lean product development. There's a time to market and production cost, which are kind of more traditional, that people can really understand. And then there's this area of market price to cost, and that's kind of the innovation side. And so he's just trying to show that product development, there's a variety of different ways lean can be applied to increase value. You can improve how fast you get things to market. You could have product development cut down production costs with design. You could also have, another big part is the price. If you can have a design that is more valuable to your end customer, you can increase your price relative to the production cost, and that gets value for the company. So there's those three metrics that lean product development can look to improve. Production cost, but that's really handled pretty easily traditionally from the production team. But time to market and value to the customer is really what we want to kind of focus on, lean product development. So a new process is needed. As we just went through those slides, it's a pretty poor process as it stands now, but there is some opportunity to improve it. So how can we improve it? So first, I just want to go through Amazon's approach to product development. There's a nice blog. One of their product managers is interviewed, Karen Perry, and he has some quotes that I pulled out. One of his quotes is, he says, product managers need to spend time with their customers and understand their business deeply. And the point there is you need to be customer driven. The customer buys the thing at the end. You, the product manager, need to understand what the customer wants. Another quote he had that I really liked is that great product companies value product skills more than specific domain experience. What he's saying is it's more valuable to a product development team to have folks that can go cross, really understand the product, how it's positioned in the market, how it's marketed, how it's sold, how it's produced, and how it's engineered, the core technology underneath it to develop on top of that and improve the product. So cross-functional is really important at Amazon, and he thinks in other product development companies. And again, similar quote to before is they work backward from customer needs, but also balanced with long-term business goals. So it's a pull system, customers are pulling it, but they emphasize the long-term, and they almost have this check and balance in place. The customer need, does it make sense with the long-term goals of the business? Customers aren't necessarily going to be seeing 5 years out what's advantageous for the management would have a better idea of what they're trying to do in 5 years from now. But the customers rather will see what they need now, and you want to kind of somehow look to balance that customer need now with your long-term goals. Another company that's been pretty good at product development is Google, and they have they published these 9 principles of innovation. I pulled out 3 of them. These principles are good to look at, but as it relates to product development, these are the 3 that I thought were most important. Big one is ideas come from anywhere. Innovation comes from anywhere, and this is something that we've been reading about in the Ideas-Driven Organization, that book. They come from everywhere. We can't expect management to come up with everything because people on the front lines tend to have a better idea of how you can improve the production process or what customer needs are. And so you need to be open to having ideas come from anywhere. Another principle that they have is focus on the user. Customer driven always. The users are the one that buy the thing at the end. They're where value is established and defined. So you need to always be working with them and understanding what they need. Another principle they have is ship and iterate, right? So product development, it's not one of these things where you make it, you design it, you make it, and then you kind of wait. It's always iterative. You need to embrace the fact that as you get something out there, you're going to get feedback from customers and look to improve it and constantly be iterating and improving your product. So there's a great book that I have in the resources of the Toyota Product Development System. They've kind of defined 3 main areas, and I'll go through each one of these areas in more depth in the next couple slides. But process, tools and technology, and skilled people. And these are what are kind of cornerstones of a good product development system, and specifically Toyota's product development system. So on the process side, there's 4 principles that you have for process, but here's a couple that I highlighted. One is, you need to remove waste, and that's what's true in production that we've seen with lean manufacturing. But what is waste in product development? And the waste is searching for data and information and getting the wrong data and prioritizing the wrong data, thinking that this is your idea is going to be the next big thing and being wrong and getting all the way through those steps, launching to market, the market doesn't want it. That is a massive waste. Another waste is poor communication. Engineering thinks one thing, marketing and sales thinks a different thing, production thinks something else, and if they're not aligned, you'll have them all doing things that are different and potentially competing. Another waste is when you have a design that you've developed, but then you start to trying to sell it to customers and it doesn't fully work. It's not necessarily that it was a bad idea, the design just wasn't properly finished, wasn't properly tested. And again, a big waste is when you get all the way to the end of a product development cycle and you realize that customers don't want it. So that's the most significant form of waste and why customers really need to be part of the equation all throughout. Another thing to be cognizant of the product development process is how information flows. Again, we have to remember that ideas come from anywhere. And time invested early in the product development process can level out future steps. So again, if you really spend a lot of time to hammer out your requirements and your selection process for ideas, you really will ensure that your prototypes that you develop are good because they're part of the best ideas that fit the requirements that you have. If you spend time on testing, that can really improve the actual production and getting to market. So you need to be cognizant of how each process steps affects the later ones, and spending too little time early will come back to bite you towards the end of the product development cycle. Something else to be cognizant in the process is you want to standardize the architecture. You want people to be able to reuse different elements of the system. You don't want to develop one product and then the next product that you make be completely different and have to start from zero. Ideally, every product development that you make is starting to build this architecture that makes future product developments easier and easier. And this is true for the engineering team, true for production, true for the marketing and sales team. You want to be, throughout your product development efforts, be building an architecture to make future efforts easier and easier because you've got such a base standardized. And so standardization does help with that base that you can reuse. You don't necessarily want to standardize how somebody thinks, but standardize that base platform that you're developing on to prevent people having to redevelop the wheel every time. So another major area of the Toyota production product development system is people, and their big focus is the chief engineer. And in many industries, that's a product manager. This is a cross-functional expert that keeps the teams connected. So somebody that can be, in Toyota's case, a very good electronics engineer, mechanical engineer, maybe firmware and software engineer, and they can keep all these engineering teams together. In many other industries, that's a product manager who can be, yes, an engineer, understand the technology, but also understand how it's produced, understand how it's positioned in the market and what customers need. So this is the primary function of responsibility, rather, of the chief engineer, product managers, keep all these teams connected and communicating. And there's also somebody to be accountable. When you have these cross-functional setups, sometimes it's difficult because you don't know, who's accountable for the end system, and that's, from the Toyota product development system, they've identified that chief engineer, product manager to be that accountable person. Another big thing with the Toyota product development system is they set up a cross-functional team, right? And they think that improves information flow and reduces waste time. That was a big waste before, is when you have information not flowing properly. It's also been a mantra of Toyota: get your hands dirty. You want the engineers to understand how something gets made so they can better engineer it. And similarly, you want them to understand how it gets marketed and sold in the marketplace so you can better, develop certain systems that the marketing and sales team is trying to highlight, because that's what the customers really need. Another element that they have is include your suppliers. Your key suppliers are part of this team. They shouldn't be siloed also, just like you don't want to silo marketing to engineering to production. You don't want to silo your suppliers. Get involved with them, understand their pain points, and how you can work with them and improve the design to help them. In terms of their culture in a product development environment, you want a culture of continuous improvement and always learning, to be able to have this iterative process and keep people engaged, as well as the product always moving forward. Tools and technology. This one's kind of interesting for the Toyota product development system, because in Toyota production, they say, don't really touch any tools or technology until it's absolutely necessary. In product development, they're a little different about it. They seem to embrace new tools and technology because for a couple of reasons. One is primarily it helps align the teams and it helps you communicate, right? So they're kind of connected, and as technology can improve that information flow between teams. The other thing is you need technology to kind of help adapt, because your product, as you start maybe a process, you may find out through the production cycle or testing or what have you that requirements need to be changed, or how it's marketed to the end customer needs to be changed. So you need a technology that can adapt with you and reduce your waste. So I've highlighted a tool that I've recently found. It's called AHA for product managers, and they have a nice little graphic here I included on the slide showing how you have all these teams traditionally trying to communicate through a variety of different ways, and each team is looking for something different, and it's all kind of in the product manager's head, but sales is disconnected to support, which is kind of disconnected to marketing. And AHA looks to change all that and have one central place that all the information for different teams is accessible by. And it's really built for lean product development. The more I started using it, the more I went through this project, I'm like, wow, they've clearly identified lean product development as a thing that they're trying to help their customers use. And so it helps integrate teams. It's a centralized place to visualize and communicate. And it's simple communication. They have this really nice feature called Notebooks that you can add various things into a live URL that gets updated as you update your roadmap or you update ideas from customers. And that's the other point that I'm going to make here. And on the next slide, they have an ideas portal, which I think is really, really powerful. So in AHA, they have this ideas portal that can help you collect ideas, and that could be directly from customers. You could have your internal stakeholders, engineers, management, production, use this portal to input ideas. The product manager can put ideas in there. So it has this infrastructure to collect them. But as we've been reading about in our ideas book, idea-driven organization book, you need to also manage and then communicate those ideas. It doesn't do anyone good just to have this collection, but then not give people feedback on why you chose something or why you didn't choose something. And so the ideas portal cleanly integrates with AHA's back end that generates the roadmap, and you select things when you want to actually make it as a feature that you're going to develop, and that gets notified the person who generated the idea says, oh, okay, yeah, this is now in production. The portal also helps you prioritize, right? Because you can vote on things, other users can vote, so you get this score that's based on your users, and it really quantifies that market need. And then on the back end, the product managers or management can apply maybe longer term scores to different ideas to make sure it aligns with the long-term goals. And again, the big part is you want to make sure that you have this portal for ideas to come in, but you also communicate back to the people generating ideas why you chose something and why you didn't choose something. So here's the recommended process that I'm proposing for product development. Instead of having these siloed teams that, and a process that steps kind of sequentially from one to the next and independently of one another, you integrate everybody and you have customers at the center. Customers should be involved in every part of the process. They should be involved in idea generation. They should be involved in screening, which you can do with that AHA portal and get their feedback, kind of do surveys to see what they like. You should involve them in the product development, kind of get their feedback of how design's progressing, maybe use them as beta testers, have them get the first units out of production, involved continuously. Same is true with marketing and sales. They should be involved in the idea generation with management and engineering and screening from their perspective. So very cross-functional and customers at the center pulling ideas through the process, being customer driven and a pull instead of a push. One thing is you'll notice here I got rid of this requirements phase of the product development cycle. And that's because if we set this up correctly, we have a strategy that everybody understands. The strategy is constantly dictating the requirements. So a new idea comes up, you just see, does this align with the strategy we've already had in place? It's not, you have to redefine the requirements every time. You just define and communicate your strategy, and it's constantly keeping everything in check. And I propose that you use AHA or similar, there are other similar tools out there for communication, standardizing how you communicate and aligning your team. And you know, the process steps, ideally you spend equal time per these major areas, and you're constantly repeating. You launch to market, and you get ideas from your customers, your stakeholders, your management on what they thought were good about this new product, what they want added, what they want maybe removed or changed, and constantly iterate. So this process versus what we had originally can be a great way to improve pull in an organization, reduce waste, improve communication across the company, and also have customer-centric, because customers provide the value for product development teams, and constantly be looking for continual improvement. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully you're able to make your product development lean. And here's some additional resources that I use that I recommend. Toyota Way, we've been reading that. That's been a great book and certainly influenced some of my presentation here. The Toyota Product Development System is also a great book. It's a pretty quick read of how Toyota does product development. And there's some other books out there of lean product development that I referenced and flipped through to help with this. But I encourage you, if you're a product manager or want to be involved more actively in product development, to check out some of these resources. But I hope this helped, and I hope you have success in improving your product development cycle. Thank you.